Alright, good day everybody. Today we are going to continue our series of algebra, finding the subject of the formula. Previously, we would have already addressed the concept of the subject of the formula. We already looked at how to find the subject of the formula using transposition and also cross division, getting rid of division and multiplication. Today we are going to look at cross multiplication, how to form the subject of the formula through cross multiplication. And we are going to jump straight onto it. So here we have an algebraic example, cross multiplication. We're going to look at all possible outcomes, or the possible outcomes. Here we have W over B is equal to R over K, cross multiplication. So let's look at the options. When cross multiplying, by the way, remember, the subject of the formula must have three things. It must be positive, it must stand alone, and it must be in the numerator. That should always be our guiding principle when finding the subject. Here it's a wild question, so we're not finding no subject. I just want to teach you the concept of cross multiplication, and then we're going to look at some examples finding the subject. So if you're given a scenario like this, or an equation like this, how can we cross multiply? Once we have a rational equal to another rational, our possible outcomes could be a bit endless sometimes. So here, a possible outcome we can bring over our B here, and we can bring the K across here. And notice that makes a cross. Thus, I guess, cross multiplication. So that gives us the same thing as WK is equal to BR. Or, either way, it doesn't matter how you put it. It could go the other way around. It could be KW is equal to BR. So that's one means of performing cross multiplication. So let's call that option 1. Not option, it's not really an option, but let's call it a way. Let's look at another possibility, or another way in which we could consider doing cross multiplication. We can also simply bring this B over here. And of course, if we do that, that would leave us with, think about it, W stays there, and that will be equal to BR over K. So all I did here, basically, I just sent over one term to the other side. I cross multiplied one term. And remember, whenever we have two terms kissing each other, multiplication is taking place. So in the event that, let's say we wanted to make W the subject, it was as simple as making a step like that. So we could call that another way, or another option, another possibility. Let's look at another possibility over here. What if I just move across just the K? Notice I have no subject here, so it's just wildcards here, right? I could simply move this K over here now. That's another possibility. And if I do that, here what I would end up with. Now I would have WK, good, over B. Hope we're following the logics here. And that would have been equal to R, right? Because all I did, I brought the K over. I left everybody as they were. And that brought me to WK or KW, remember the other doesn't matter here, divided by B is equal to R. And that gave us our possibility there. Is there any other possibility that exists here? No, I don't think so. But if there is, again, feel free to bring it down in the comments. So we can either bring both terms on the other side. So we can bring the B over and the K over, and we cross multiply and end up with what we have here presently. We could bring 1 over onto the other side from the bottom and it goes up. And we could bring 1 over to the other side and it goes up. Oh, another possible thing is we could also switch positions. Yes, maybe we should look at that because that could come in handy sometimes. It's handy to know that when finding the subject sometimes. And by switching position, I mean this. I could send up the B, yes, and I could bring down the R at the same time. So it's like we're switching positions. And or maybe there's a term for it that I'm not aware of. And if we do that, we will end up with a scenario like this. So notice the B goes up, the R comes down. So then I would end up with W over R, and that's equal to B over K. Yes? So I just switched positions, and of course, note obviously, the same thing could happen the other way around. So I could have done the same thing with the W and the K. I could have sent up the K and bring down the W right away, or I could send the W down and send up the K. Either way you choose to do it, we'll end up with the same result. Good. And this is really and truly what we need to know when performing the subject of the formula. Once we know these few tricks here, it will help us to find the subject, given that the subject is in a, let's say, a not too comfortable position. Another thing I like to do when doing this, I like to show it with a real number. When you look at a real number, you could also see the possibilities. So think, for example, now, let's suppose I have something that we could all associate with. So supposing I have something like, let's say 3 over 6, and this is just for we to see how much sense it makes. I usually show students this, so if they don't get the algebraic expression, they can also remember this example. And all this is saying here that we have to respect the equal sign, because the equal sign says something. If I'm telling you this is equal to this, you have to accept that this is equal to this. So let's do the same thing now, but now we're using numbers. So we could see the result. Just know that we use algebraic expression. So W, R, K, B, those mean nothing because we don't know their value. But now that we know these numbers' value, it will make more sense. First of all, 3 over 6 is equal to a half. And this is true because we can break down the 3 here. 3 could go into itself 1 time, and 3 could go into 6 2 times. And notice we have a half is equal to a half. And that is true. We cannot deny that. So we know that is true. Let's go again. I didn't do no cross multiplication. I was just proving the fact that the equal is saying something, right? But let's do cross multiplication. And I'll start with the same one. Let's use the first scenario. I just bring over my 6 over here. Remember, cross multiplication. So if I do that, what I will be left with would have been 3 is equal to 6 over 2. Notice I just brought up my 6. And this is a true statement because 3 obviously is equal to 3 because 6 divided by 2 is 3. Cross multiplication. Good. Hope you all seen my trend here. Let's try another one. Supposing I bring up my 2, cross multiplication, and I bring up my 6. If I do this, look at what I would end up with. Look at what's happening here. The 2 goes up with the 3, and mind you, that will not become 32. Instead, that will become, remember, we're doing cross multiplication. So that will be 3 multiplied by 2. And on the other side, we will have 6 multiplied by 1. And I think everybody should see where I end up here already. 6 is equal to 6. And this is also true. Remember, we're looking at the possible outcomes. Good? So cross multiplication, any way you twist and turn it, you have to end up with the same. Let's do a last one. Let's do one more. Of course, you could always play with it. Let's do a last one. Let me just send up the 2 over here. So I'm sending up the 2. And remember, we could do it like just now there. You could send up the 2, bring down the 3, send up the 3, bring down the 2. Or you could send up the 6, bring down the 1, send down the 1, bring up the 6. Any way you turn it, you have to end up with the same thing. The equation have to stand to be true. So if I do this here now, and I'm coming over here with this one, if I send up my 2 on this side, I would end up with 3 multiplied by 2. All that's on 6. And remember, this one here, that one stays for itself on the other side, right? So that will be equal to 1. And if I solve here, you would notice that I will end up with 6 divided by 6 equal to 1. And we all know that, well, I trust we all know 6 divided by 6 is evidently 1. And this is an example, as I usually like to tell students. If you cannot remember the algebra, think of a genuine example that you could recall on your own and apply the different ways and see which way would work to be true. So notice when we did this, when we bring over here and we multiply, okay, this is true. So then you could go back to your algebraic expression. If I might just pop up a random one here again. So then you could go back to your algebraic expression and say, okay, if I have something like this and I want to make something the subject, let's see. Okay, it is true that I could bring up this just so. And then I would have WT is equal, WT over C is equal to B. So this is just one way in which we could make an example help us remember the rules. And with the example, you would know if it's true when you equate it and whatever you get equal to is equal to indeed. So here you notice when I bring over the 2 and I multiply by the 3, I did got 6, so I did get 6, and then the 6 divided by 6 did give me 1. And that's how I know that, okay, yes, this is true. Now, quickly, let's do some examples and then wrap up this video. So examples here, they're asking us to find C or solve for C. In other words, we want C to be the subject of the formula. And again, I repeat, to simply make C the subject of the formula, we just have to make sure that C is saying 3 things about itself. 1, it is positive, meaning that it doesn't have a negative sign in front of it. 2, it is in a numerator, meaning that if we have a fraction, it is at the top and not at the bottom. Numerator is at the top, denominator is at the bottom. So it must be positive, it must be in the numerator, and last but not least, it must stand alone. It has to be by itself. If it's not by itself, if it's not positive, and if it's not in the numerator, then it's not quite in the subject, or it's not quite the subject of the formula. So here we have these 3 examples. You could feel free to do it. Of course, you could pause the video right here, see if you attempt it, and before I show my results, or before we do it. So let's go. I'm going to start here. You can pause, of course. But here I go. So remember, we want to make C the subject of the formula. So to make C the subject of the formula, in this case here, all I need to do is get rid of this V here. So how do I get rid of this V? Simple, cross multiplication. So I will simply send my V at the top, and I would not move anything else because I want the C to stand alone. The only thing that is with this C here is that V. So if I send that V on the other side, my problem is solved. So that would leave me now with C equal to EV. I like that. So I say that's somebody name. So EV over Y or VE. This here doesn't matter. You have VE, you have EV or VE, it's okay, same thing. Multiplication is commutative. So it doesn't matter which one comes first, which one comes second. As long as they multiply, you will get the same answer. So in other words, 2 times 3, this is what commutative simply means. 2 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 2. The answer doesn't change. So E times V is the same thing as V times E. So whichever one you want to put first, don't hurt your head over that. You will get the same thing if we know what is E and if we know what is V. And here we have our answer. Notice C is standing alone, is in a numerator, and it is positive. Problem solved. That would be correct if you got that. Let's go to number 2 now. Number 2, I have T over V is equal to 12 over C. Notice C is in the denominator position. Remember, the subject cannot be in the denominator. The subject has to be in the numerator. So that is one thing we have to fix there. Secondly, C is not standing alone. C is actually with a fraction. It's under D. It's under 12. So this is not standing alone. We have to also get rid of the 12. And C is positive. That's the only thing that is true so far about C. So we want to make sure that no, C still remains positive, but we want to make sure that it's also standing alone and in the denominator. How will I go about doing this? Firstly, I want it to be in the numerator. I will fix that first. How will I do that? I will cross multiply with the T. So in this case, I will send up my C, but guess what? I will bring down my T. So I'm switching the position of these 2 terms here. So now that will leave me with, follow me here, C over V is equal to 12 over T. That's my first step there. So I simply cross multiply between the C, or switch positions rather, between the C and the T through multiplication. I brought up one, brought down the other one. Good? Remember, that's one of the steps that we looked at earlier. And now my C is in the numerator and my C is also positive. So what do I need to make this C now? Stand alone. How do I do that? Now I need to get rid of the V. And how do I get rid of the V? I send my V to the top. And I leave it there, and I leave the C there for itself. When I do that now, I will have C is now equal to 12V. 12V, or if you want to put 12 multiplied by V, or if you want to put 12 dot V, or if you want to put 12 bracket V, all same thing. Same thing we say. So 12V divided by t. And that does it. Easy does it. This solves my problem. So C now is equal to 12V divided by T. And notice again, C is standing alone, C is positive, and C is in the numerator. And remember, the numerator test is always simple. Once it's standing there, it's the same thing as C over 1. And once it's C over 1, we know that the top is the denominator. Sorry, we know that the top is the numerator, and the 1 here at the bottom will be the denominator. So our C is good to go there. And last but not least, this one is a little intricate, but again, it's very straightforward if we apply our concept. Remember, when finding this subject, we walk away from the subject and we go towards the subject. So I know right away some of us might be tempted to just cross multiply that C, but now we have an addition with 5 here. So we have to get rid of the distracting elements first. We walk away and towards. So first thing here, we transpose our 5. And I hope remember our transposition rule. It's one of the first videos we did. So remember, all the rules will come to play in time to come. When we finish this series, we're going to do some higher level question, and you will see how all the rules come together to make a nice collage of algebra finding the subject of the formula. Right, so I'll send my 5 on the other side, and remember the rules. If it's positive, once I bring it over the negative sign, it will become negative. So that should leave me here now with 2p divided by C equal to 10 minus 5. Yes? Remember, positive 5, when I bring it over, it becomes negative 5. Or as some persons would do also, you take away 5 here so that you could cancel this 5. And because you did it on one side of the equation, you also do it to the other side of the equation. So that's another way to look at it, right? And of course, when we do that, that's basic arithmetic there. 10 minus 5, we know that will give us 5. Good. And here comes the tricky part now. Some persons might think the best thing to do is to send the 2p below here. Remember, we can see the 5 here as 5 over 1. So we have this scenario here. And some persons might think, okay, to make the C stand alone, all we need to do is send this 2p over here. So some persons might think we send the p over here, and then, well, we bring up the 1, or we just leave the C alone. But no, if we do that, we will be so wrong. Because remember, the 2p here is in the numerator. And even if you get rid of this, that would not make the C automatically stand in the numerator. What you do there, if you do something like that, what you do there, when you get rid of the 2p, you leave in C like this. Believe it or not. That is what you're doing with C. You leave in 1 over C, thus making C the denominator still, even if you refuse to put that 1 up there when you remove the 2p. So that would not work. Instead, what you need to do for the C to be how you want it is send up the C. So you send up the C so that it goes to the numerator, and you bring down the 5 so that the 5 comes down to the denominator. And that would leave us with 2p over 5 is equal to C. And that is our answer. And of course, some persons prefer to put the subject first. So this would be the same thing as C is equal to 2p. I ain't changing nothing. I just switching around the positions. 2p over 5. Same thing, same thing. So 2p over 5 is equal to C. C is equal to 2p over 5. And that is basically how we apply the rules of cross multiplication to find the subject of a formula. So we're going to come to the end of this video today. Again, feel free to share, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. In the next one, we're going to address the last rule, that is getting rid of a square root or a square. Until then, you have a good one. Stay good.